NFL, everybody. I'm Joe Fortenbaugh, and this is another installment of Get Sharp, joined again by Twitter. You know, what would be the best way to phrase you? We know senior race and sports analyst here at Caesars Palace, Todd Fuhrman. Twitter maniac, workaholic.
I would try and go all-around sports guru, but that might come off sounding a little bit arrogant.
Let's take it easy. We're still in the beginning phases of the show.
I more or less live and breathe this stuff during the course of our busy season. So from Labor Day until the culmination of the NCAA tournament, this is in my blood. This is what I do. And any chance we have to educate people out there who are just trying to get an understanding for the industry, that's what we're here for. They have to thank guys like you who want to share the information.
Yeah, guys like me. All jokes aside, we're back today to talk about 4 big games on the NFL schedule this week. We're going to start at 4:15 in New England, where yet again the Patriots are a featured game on the schedule as they play host to the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas is coming off a bye week. They've gotten a chance to get healthy. New England coming off yet another big game. They pull out a win against the Jets. They move to 4-1. You take a look at this game, line opens at Patriots -7, hangs tight. Really hasn't moved much yet. It seems a bit high to some people because Dallas can score points and New England has had trouble defending the pass this year. What has gone into making this line?
This number right now is a case of the Patriots being one of the public darlings so far. We talk about a team who hasn't laid less than 7 at home at any point this season. They covered against the Chargers. They covered against the Jets thanks to a 1 yard short on 3rd down that led to a late field goal. Bookmakers would have loved the Patriots to be in victory formation. Take these. Dallas 6-0 the last 6 times they've been dogged. This team's coming off a bye. Still my pick to win the very competitive NFC East. I think with Miles Austin returning to the lineup, this is a team that's going to push the Patriots to the brink. I think it could be closer than the experts think.
I do as well. Do you see this thing being high scoring? The Patriots lines continue to come out over 50 points in terms of the total. Are you seeing that as well?
Highest total on the board this week, coming out at 54, been bet up to 55. Hard to bet Patriot games under the number right now. I think as you start to get higher and higher to these 50s and 60 ranges that you may see this year in the NFL, it gets tougher to stomach. But this week, would it really surprise anyone if this game was a 38-34 type shootout? It wouldn't shock me.
We're in a situation now where bye weeks have come into play starting last week. How much do you guys take into account bye weeks? What is that term? Because a lot of times you hear people talking about, well, you give the 3 points immediately as being a home favorite, but what is the bye week factor?
When you talk about bye weeks and how it's going to factor into the point spread, certain coaches, it makes a much bigger difference for them. These teams haven't been together that long, given the strike short in preparation early in the season. Hopefully they're able to mature. Take Coach Shanahan, for example, in Washington. 9-5 coming off the bye over the course of his career. The veteran coaches are going to have a huge edge to try and get their teams prepared for this week. However, that's where handicappers get a huge edge. You won't see it factored into the number. The public remembers what they saw last week. A team who hasn't played, out of sight, out of mind.
That almost sounds a bit rehearsed, but I like that. That sounds good. 4:05, speaking of a team coming off a bye, the 3-1 Baltimore Ravens, 2 at home this season, play host to a suddenly banged up Houston Texans team, 3-2 coming off a dramatic last-second loss to the Oakland Raiders. Houston 1-1 on the road this season. Biggest line move of the week. Ravens open around 5.5, games up to 7.5, 8, depending on where you're at now. Is this a case of the fact that Mario Williams being out for the year, headline news, Andre Johnson, headline news, he's out for the game, and Baltimore relaxed and refreshed? And let's throw a number out there. The Ravens 8-2 against the spread in their last 10 coming off the bye.
The Ravens are a team right now who I think have to be considered favorites to win the AFC. And they went out there and did it with defense against the Jets on Sunday night, 34-17 leading into the bye week. Absolutely dominated a team that I thought could compete in the Jets, who looked to be taking a step back. Houston, without Mario Williams, without Andre Johnson, as you alluded to, Matt Schaub didn't practice today, so it says he's a little nicked up. You saw in the late game situations, they just don't have that go-to weapon. And a team who was talked about as maybe being a favorite for the AFC 2 weeks ago, a dominating win over Pittsburgh, you lose to Oakland. All of a sudden, the public is off the bandwagon, and you're now catching over a touchdown. Price starts to get a little steep there. This Texans team isn't chopped liver. I'm not sure they can compete. The defense is physical as the Baltimore Ravens.
You take Mario Williams and his 5 sacks out of the lineup, you replace that with rookie second-rounder Brooks Reed. Obviously, that could be a good sign for Ray Rice going against a linebacking core that's suddenly inexperienced, not nearly as talented. Not a knock against Brooks Reed, but you can't duplicate what Mario Williams does on the field. When you look at this, there's been such a big movement. Do you possibly see this going higher with an opportunity for people to middle this if they got the Ravens early in the week?
Anytime you see a number in the market move past the 7, 7.5, 8, there's nothing to stop it from going up to as high as 9.5. Before you get to 10 is the next key number the gamblers look for. So as the public money starts to come in, you'll see bookmakers inch that number up a little bit at a time. There's no fear that a game is necessarily going to fall 8 or 9. And I say that to folks who had the Jets and maybe got the worst of the number last week against the Patriots. They wouldn't agree with me. But when you talk about key numbers, you can go up as high as you need to. I do anticipate there'll be some buyback on the Texans as the price starts to climb. But no one's going to come in and bet them now, hoping to get the best of the number.
Moving forward to 1 o'clock, a game that before the season started, no one would have paid any attention to. Suddenly, it's become a marquee game. 4-1 San Francisco under new head coach Jim Harbaugh travels to Detroit to take on the 5-0 Detroit Lions, coming off an impressive Monday night victory against the Chicago Bears. Game opens at Detroit -5. Detroit suddenly a public team, but that line has now moved down a little bit towards the Niners, -4. Is this because Detroit's coming in on short rest, or is this Niners team for real?
It's hard to argue with what we've seen out of the Niners. They were absolutely tremendous last week. We talked about Tampa Bay and how good they'd been away from home. They weren't good last week, and a lot of that had to do with San Francisco and what Coach Harbaugh has going on up there in the Bay Area. This is a Lions team who had their Super Bowl against the Bears on Monday night, a game they've had circled since the schedule was released. It's awfully tough to come back on short rest with a target on your back. However, there are huge situational factors working against the Niners as well. This will be their third game in the Eastern time zone in 6 weeks this season. They're 2-0 against the spread with 2 outright victories in their previous trips. Going to make for an awfully tough atmosphere in Detroit. I think the 49ers have to be considered a live dog. How do you stand in the way of this Silver Crush defense and the Detroit Lion juggernaut right now?
And especially the fact that everyone watched Detroit dismantle Chicago on Monday night. That second half, they completely took over the game. Defensively, more than anything, they were killing Jay Cutler. People are going to think about that happening to Alex Smith. That's got to be a concern.
This is an offense right now who didn't have a running game. All of a sudden, Javid Best burst onto the scene, and 49er fans are familiar with what he did at Cal. I mean, he's a tremendous playmaker, and he gives Detroit an element in the offense they haven't had. We all know how good Calvin Johnson is. But Brandon Pettigrew continues to emerge as a viable tight end. Nate Burleson has been serviceable, and Javid Best gives you a home run hitter in the backfield. This offense is awfully scary and going to pose stiff tests for defenses throughout the season.
Where do you think the public lands on this game?
I think the public will come in on Detroit late. I think a lot of the money you've seen early is some of the professional bettors trying to get the best of the number. I think this number will settle somewhere in that 4 to 5 ballpark. I'd be surprised to see it move further south than that.
4:15, another East Coast game in a division rivalry in the NFC South as 4-1 New Orleans on their 3rd straight road trip travels to Tampa Bay to take on the 3-2 Buccaneers. Buccaneers get lambasted at San Francisco last week, blown out of the water, had no business being in that game. LeGarrette Blount out for this one. Ernest Graham's going to get the workload. Saints continue to win. They're in close games, but they get that lead and they protect it late. We saw it happen last week against Carolina. New Orleans opens as a 5-point favorite. Line moves a little bit towards the Buccaneers to 4.5. What's that a sign of? Is that because it's the 3rd straight road game for the Saints?
And this is a game where we know exactly where the public's going to be. You hang a number
Tampa
like
Bay.
this, 4.5. Hey, I wish that was the case. We know they'll come in fast and furious on New Orleans Saints in this type of contest. And this is where you hope that the home dog bites with something fierce. Tampa Bay comes into this game limping a little bit from that San Francisco pasting that they took last weekend, coming off the short week where they beat Indianapolis on Monday night. This is a Buccaneers team who, if they want to be considered for real, needs to make a statement at home and defend that home turf. Always tough to play 3 straight road games, but the against the spread numbers say something very different. I mean, you talk about teams who are playing their 3rd straight road game. The last 5 teams to do it, 5-0 straight up and against the number. The Atlanta Falcons last season in the 3rd game went up to Seattle, the end of the Seahawks, pretty devastating loss. This is a Saints team I think needs to be mentioned in the same breath as the Green Bay Packers as an NFC contender. Awfully tough to stand in front of that Drew Brees juggernaut. Maybe, just maybe, Tampa has some magic up their sleeve.
Brees cruises the 350 passing yards every week, it seems like, no matter who they're playing. Saints defense shows up at times, and you got to figure Mike Williams is going to need to be a factor in this one for Tampa Bay to make some noise. You also got to figure there's going to be a good week of practice out of the Bucs, especially after what happened last week.
But there's no question, if you can't get your players' attention after that game Sunday where you never were competitive from the start against the big dog in your division, so to speak, I really think Tampa Bay is going to bring a max effort. The bigger question is, even if they play their best game, is it good enough to beat the Saints?
Max effort from Todd Fuhrman today, senior race and sports analyst here at Caesars Entertainment. Thanks a lot for joining me. I appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. Hopefully we can educate some of the audience and give them some information.
The pinstripes add a touch of class to get sharp. We very much appreciate that. Thank you for wearing it.
We try and do what we can. Eventually Joe will dress the part, but we'll get there eventually.
I'm going to wear a tuxedo for bowl season, ladies and gentlemen. Bowl season, casual until then. Thanks for tuning in. Enjoy the games. We'll be back on Monday night to preview the Jets and the Dolphins.